Hi, thank you, all of you that are joining us tonight. We will be bringing you a live chat with our lovely experienced panelists that are going to share with us about, feeling alone and how GAP might be able to help you and your family. Nancy Rosenberg is going to be sharing with us. She and Gene McConnnachie wrote an article that's in our current issue called Friends of Brian, Achieving a Quality of Life Through Group Action Planning. And they're going to share with us how we may all be able to use it and put it into our children's life. So please welcome everybody. I'm Shantae from Parenting Special Needs Magazine, and I'm going to pass it along to Kimberly Breen.
Hi, thank you, Shantae. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you to our panelists. I'm Kim Breen. I'm coming to you from Chicago and interested in seeing where everyone else is sitting right now. We just had a pretty big storm go through, so I feel for you if you're on the east. I live here in Chicago with my husband and son. My son is 11 years old and has autism. And I know I'm one of those family members right now who could kind of use a team during these unique times when we've been sheltering in place. Yeah. I'm happy to say hi to Mimi and have her start to introduce herself. Part of the work I also do is with the Home and Community Positive Behavior Support Network, and excited to be able to do that with Mimi.
Thanks. And I'm just going to be moderating the chat tonight, so I'm going to go off video in a second. But I do lead the Home and Community Network. I'm a consultant working with a number of different agencies, and I also teach at Purdue Global University in the Applied Behavior Analysis program. So welcome everybody, and I'm turning it to Flip.
Hi, good evening everybody. Thank you, Mimi. My name is Flip Gray. I am the co-director of the Center for Family Involvement at Virginia Commonwealth University. I am also the parent to two one tween, one teen. And my teenager has disabilities and my tween does not. So looking forward to the conversation this evening and all of our sharing. And now I'm going to turn it to Nancy Rosenberg.
Hi everybody, I'm joining from Seattle, Washington, where I live with my husband and my son Brian, who is 27 and who lives with us. I have two kids, Brian, and I have another child, David, who now just lives in Seattle. And I work at the University of Washington, where I'm a professor in the College of Education, but I'm here tonight to talk about my family and how group action planning has helped us, our entire family, in helping our son Brian. And I'm also really excited to have one of our group action plan members, Gene McConnnachie, here to also talk about our experiences.
Hi everyone, I'm Gene, and I'm a psychologist working in the Seattle area. I spent 25 years working with the state DDA, Developmental Disabilities Administration, as a PBS expert and specialist consulting with families. And I got to know Nancy and her family really well during a really low crisis point that Nancy will probably talk a little bit more about. And it turned out to be just about the start of the process we're going to describe tonight, group action planning. So welcome to all of you. I hope that you ask lots of questions.
Thank you, Gene. Thank you for saying hi. Thank you everyone for being here. Gene's right. We hope that you type into the chat box and say hi during this time. You can put comments or questions in there. And we have several folks with us, Mimi, Flip, and Sarah, who may be able to write back to you in the chat box or help vocalize your questions and comments. And then it gives the rest of us here an opportunity to respond to them. So Shantae mentioned at the beginning that we're talking about this GAP process. And I love how you said, Shantae, it's, this idea of if you're feeling alone in the process of helping your children, what can we do? So Gene, would you share just a little bit more about what is GAP, what it stands for, and sort of what the process is.
Yeah, group action planning is kind of a mouthful and doesn't necessarily reflect clearly what we are going to talk about. But we decided to stay with that name because it was chosen by a couple of parents from Kansas who also taught at the University of Kansas and ran the Beach Family Center. I think they both retired now and turned that over to others. But group action planning was what they called it when they developed a support system for their son who was coming into adulthood where school supports were ending. Group action planning is a way that you can really focus on helping families develop a quality of life for the whole family and not just focusing quality of life on the individual. And something that they wrote about in 1996 in a book on PBS, one of the many chapters in that book. I know Nancy has that book handy. Maybe she'll show it later on so everyone can write down that title and look that up.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you. And I appreciate you making it sort of an informal definition. And we'll continue to do that as we chat tonight. So you'll get even a better idea of what the process is as we hear about how it's been applied. So Nancy, before you talk about the process using that group action planning with your own family, would you tell us a little bit more about your family?
Sure. So I have two children, Brian and David, 2 years apart. Brian is a wonderful young man. He is 27 now, and he is significantly impacted by autism and by intellectual disability. He needs support pretty much with all the aspects of everyday life. He needs people there all the time to keep him safe. He has limited verbal ability. He can ask for things he wants in 1 or 2 words, but you can't have a conversation with him. And so he, in his very younger days, we struggled a lot with challenging behaviors, a lot of them related to his communication problems. So yeah, and then I have my younger son, David, is typically developing and now lives on his own in Seattle.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being willing to share how the GAP process helped your family. It sounds like over a large number of years, right? I know for me, sometimes I try to remember back to challenges we had. And even a few years ago, it's the good news for everyone listening is it gets better. And it's often like you kind of forget some of the pain from the hardest times. But can we ask you, what brought you to the GAP process originally? You know, what kind of challenge did you hope it would help address for your family? Why anyone listening might want to consider something like the GAP process?
Yeah, so our Friends of Brian's group, that's what we call our group. Our group is the Friends of Brian. It has been going on now for 11 years, which is a little bit hard to believe that many years have gone by. But, you know, Brian, I mentioned from his early days, we struggled with a lot of challenging behaviors. But when he was little, we kind of muddled through. Elementary school, we seemed to have kind of gotten things figured out and things. It wasn't easy, but we were managing through junior high. But then when Brian was 14, he started to have extreme self-injurious behavior. He would just have these episodes that just seemed to come out of the blue of severe self-injury, all directed at himself, scratching at his face, hitting his head, biting his hand. And it was by far the most difficult thing we had dealt with yet. It was just awful. I just dreaded waking up to another day of these episodes that we couldn't figure out. And we had multiple people helping us and couldn't figure them out. It ended up with him being hospitalized for it. And medication really helped with these episodes. But we decided at that point, we felt like we were just at this crisis time of, can we keep Brian home with us? Can we handle these behaviors? Can we really do this? And we decided to kind of re-look at Brian's life and see, like, are we really doing the best we can to make sure he has a high quality of life? And we decided to do this by starting a person-centered planning process. I don't know if people are familiar with person-centered plans, but
I would explain it just in case.
Yeah, they are awesome. A person-centered plan is when you get together a group of people that care about your child, and it's usually a pretty defined process. And oftentimes in your community, you'll have people that will facilitate these. Ours was facilitated by the ARC of our county, ARC of King County. And they go through this process where you brainstorm your child's strengths, their challenges, what they like, what they don't like. And then you start envisioning what your dreams are for your child and what your nightmares are for your child. And then start to come up with goals, actions that will get you to your dreams and avoid your nightmares. And typically, a person-centered plan happens over a couple meetings, and ours was planned over 3 meetings. And it was great. But after we'd had 2 meetings and I saw how far we had to go, I was like, we're going to finish this last meeting, and all we're going to have is this huge list. I mean, not all, it was great, but we're going to have this list of goals that we have to accomplish. And partially it was the year that we had just been through. I think we were so exhausted, so kind of stretched thin. But even without that, I knew how daunting it was to try to bring stuff together while just trying to make it through the day sometime, and just was afraid that we were just going to be left, my husband and me, to kind of do this all on our own. And it just happened that at that time, I was reading this book on positive behavior support and read this chapter on group action planning, which talked about, it was kind of like the person-centered planning process, like stretched across time, like this group of committed people who would meet continually over time to try to put into action your goals for your child, and to help you troubleshoot, help spread the work of doing this across a lot of people.
I love that description of it being a continuum, and even that you went from person-centered planning and then sort of continued that work into group action planning. And for everyone listening who's all around the country, different groups take on person-centered planning even slightly differently. For some, it's a process that lasts years in and of itself, right? So I feel like you're making that point that when you get to the point of needing that level of intensive support, see what all the resources are around you, look more. We're hoping that folks leave this session and you check out the Home and Community Positive Behavior Support Network. You check out Parenting Special Needs Magazine. You find these other resources that you can pull together the way Nancy found a resource that helped her. And to know that processes like person-centered planning can really go a long way to help folks. And then this can kind of tag team in and help it. It almost became, it sounded, Nancy, like more like a part of your life, right? How long in total were you or are you having Friends of Brian?
Yeah, it's been 11 years. And I just can't honestly imagine having, of course we would have, but I can't imagine having had to go through the last 11 years without Friends of Brian. It has just been such a support to Brian, to our entire family.
Nancy, could you tell us the name of the book again, just so, or hold it up, just so
Yeah,
anybody
the one
wants
with
to
that
know?
chapter. It's an old book now. It's from 1996. It's called Positive Behavioral Support, Including People with Difficult Behavior in the Community. There was a lot of great information in this book. It's by Kagel, and Dunlap. If somebody wants to type that into the chat.
So for those out there listening and for our friends monitoring the chat box, you're welcome to share thoughts with the group. So has anyone on participated in person-centered planning yourself? Has anyone who's joining us right now engaged in a sort of team process for your children or your child and your family? So let us know in the chat box, and our chat moderators, please don't hesitate to jump in and share with us. So really our chat monitors are going to be able to voice your thoughts in the chat box. So whatever you type in there, they'll be able to share it verbally with us. So thank you all for participating in the chat, and thank you for that. So Nancy and Gene, you're talking about an 11-year process that feels like a critical part of your family's quality of life. For people who are listening, how would they get started with such a process? So how did you kind of make that leap from person-centered planning into, you read about it, right? And a lot of people out there might do that. And then what was the next step?
So I will say that the next step was really hard for me because I really don't like asking people for things. I never have. And it had been hard for me even to ask people to spend 3 evenings going through this person-centered planning process. And so then I was like, and now I'm going to be asking them even more to keep doing this, because my initial idea was we didn't collected such a great group of people together for the person-centered plan. They seemed to be exactly what was described in this chapter for group action planning. So it made sense to ask the same group of people, but I was really hesitant to ask them to do more. But one of the things I loved in the chapter, again, it was by Turnbull and Turnbull, so Rudin and Turnbull. One of the things they said there that I think really enabled me to do this was that they talked about how successful group action planning has to be not just about people helping an individual with a disability. You have to set it up so that people are getting something out of it for themselves as well. So for instance, they talk about really doing it in a social way. So not in a meeting room at work, but at somebody's home, serving food, giving people time to socialize before and after the work part of it, so that people, again, are getting some personal things out of it. Of course, everybody wants to help, but it's more than just helping. And so we decided we would do that. My husband and I, we'd do it at our house. We'd provide food before it. And so that was enough to get me to ask at our last person-centered planning meeting to ask people who would be interested in continuing. No pressure, but would you be interested? And everybody was. I mean, nobody said no. I mean, I think that person-centered planning process creates such momentum. I think everybody was excited to keep it going.
I'll ask a question.
I was going to add, Shante, as one of the team members, it's going there and expecting to have this social time and a little dinner and maybe some wine, since these were evening meetings, or a beer. That was actually one of the draws too, and getting to hang out with all these interesting people and expand my social networks was one of my big reinforcers for staying involved for 11 years.
Well, I think that's great. And what I wanted to ask, I have 2 questions on that, is in case people have not read the article, like who do you invite? And what if I have a younger child? I mean, to me, this would still be beneficial if I didn't even have a person-centered plan, because I would think I would benefit from a younger child having the support all the way through. Looking back, my daughter's 23, but anyways, I think that it would be beneficial. But who do you invite?
So first, I will say absolutely. Boy, after having started this at 14, I wished we'd had it since Brian was like 4. We could have benefited 3 too, you know, all along. So absolutely, starting it early is a good thing. So the Turnbulls talk about having people, first of all, people that are involved in all aspects of your child's life. So if they're in school, people from school, if they're involved in the community, people from the community, family members, friends. Our group was and is amazing because we really have people, even though we started it when Brian was 14, we have people going back, like Brian's infant toddler teacher is on our Friends of Brian, and his one-on-one paraprofessional from elementary school is on Friends of Brian. His grandmother, of course, his brother. We have like his junior high teacher who we got very close with is on it. His high school teacher is on it. So we have a neighbor who has nothing to do with special education, but who just always was really interested in Brian, always enjoyed trying to interact with Brian. He's on the team. We've tried over the years. Brian doesn't have a lot of close friendships with peers because he's not been that interested in that, but we've tried over the years to have a peer involved. It was great to have Gene on the team because he was, you know, from the Department of Disabilities Administration, so he kind of had some insights into some resources that were available. As Brian's left school and he got a job, his job coach is on the team. So we've also continued to add people as Brian, whenever somebody of significance comes into Brian's life, somebody that he's interacting with on a regular basis, we invite them to be on part of the team.
That's great to know that it can change and grow and evolve over time, right? You maybe have gained some members and sometimes even maybe lose members over time for a variety of reasons. Although these days people can even join virtually, maybe, right? And that's one of the benefits. So there's a question in the Q&A, and please everyone continue. You can type into the Q&A, also in the chat box. And they ask, where does Brian live now? So I know you briefly mentioned that earlier, but maybe that question is also sort of asking, like, how's Brian doing?
So Brian still lives with us. And I will tell you that when he was 14 and we were going through this, I'm not sure that I would have thought he could still be living with us when he was 27. He's living with us because it works for him and it works for us right now. We're both very happy with it. He's doing great. He has a job that he goes to every morning. He's out and about in the community throughout the day. He has a volunteer job that he's had for over 10 years in the afternoon. Again, he needs somebody with him all of the time, so it's not like he's going to any of this independently, but he's happy and we're happy, and we just can't quite believe how well things have worked out.
Thank you. I thank you for that. You know, I think people want to hear the current update, right? So thank you for sharing that. And thank you also for sharing that it is about quality of life, like you and Jean said. So I think everyone has their own idea of what quality of life is. And I hear you saying he's happy and that you all are content. You're all comfortable together. And, you know, at the beginning of your story, it sounded like that was a challenge, right? And so that's the success of being able to maintain that living situation is great to hear. Gene, would you add anything about kind of how to get started in this process?
Well, Kim, first I want to say at every meeting, Nancy hasn't talked too much about that process, but the meetings are like twice a year now. Maybe in the early days, if there's a crisis, maybe she would ask for another meeting, and not everyone makes all the meetings. Some people can't. But in the process of the meetings, it starts out with pretty much social time, which is fun time. It's maybe recess time for a lot of us. And then we sit down and talk about how to help accomplish some of the goals that either came out of the original person-centered plan, or how to focus on new goals. And one of the goals has been planning for Brian's eventual move into more of an adult independent living kind of situation. And if you know anything about the adult world and getting housing and programs and staff support, it's challenging, but all along we've been working that idea and trying to develop the resources and what skills will Brian need to develop himself to be successful moving away from his family and maybe living with roommates in some supported living kind of situation.
Hey folks, Elaine had a follow-up question, and her question is, does he participate with the group? I'm guessing that means the GAP group when you meet.
Yeah, so he's always there with the group, or he's always able to be there. He kind of comes and goes during the meeting. Again, he has very limited verbal ability, so he's not participating verbally, but he's with us as we have the meetings. Again, some meetings he seems to want to be there less, some meetings he wants to be there more, but he always seems really happy to see all these people from all the different parts of his life.
I bet it's nice, like you said, that longevity, right? To see people. I know my son loves to see a teacher from years ago. It's just this like extra special thing, and I think for so many families it is. Flip, you're checking out our live stream. Are there some comments or questions there that you'd like to bring into the room?
Yes, we have a few. Thank you. One, I'll start with the comments. One of the folks that are watching from Facebook said, this is a great idea. They said that they don't have anything like this and they feel quite isolated since the pandemic started. That their child is 25 and no programs have started yet, and that child is with them every day. He needs more stimulation, but at this point, he's happy for the most part. So it sounds like challenging time, and they're making do the best that they can, like so many of us are right now. So thank you for bringing that insight into the room. One of the questions that's been asked a couple of times is, who facilitates these meetings?
Yeah, so the first of all, the Turnbull chapter doesn't really say who should, it just says somebody should. And I think it says somebody who's comfortable facilitating the meetings. I always facilitate our meetings, and saying I was comfortable would be rather a stretch at the start. I was nervous at first. I'd never done anything like this before, and I wasn't sure how it would go. But it helped that what we did for the first probably couple of years of the meetings was I would pick one of the dreams from our person-centered plan. Like, for instance, one of the dreams was, again, Brian was 14 at the time. Brian will eventually have a job that he loves and wants to go to. And so that helped me with the topics. I'd always pick something like that. And another one was something like Brian will have leisure activities that he enjoys. And so I'd pick one of those dreams. I'd get one of those big tablets of Post-its, you know, those big ones, and I'd put it up on an easel, and I just wrote it up there, and I just kind of open it up to people. Okay, so let's just start brainstorming. So I guess I didn't have to be very good at it. It just kind of took care of itself once I had the goal, and all I had to basically do was write things down. But I've always facilitated them. And then after the meeting, I'll write up a kind of a summary based on the notes that I was writing down on the big flipboard or whatever it's called. Write up a summary and send it out to people. One of the things about this has always been a little hard for me because I don't like asking people to do things. But one of the other important elements of group action planning, one of the ideas is that everybody's going to volunteer for a little bit. And so if everybody's doing a little bit, everything gets done without anybody, including the family, being overwhelmed. And so part of the facilitation should be, and I'm sometimes better or worse about this, kind of trying to solicit volunteers for different things that come up. But then when I send out that summary afterwards, I just email it out. You know, I'll note who volunteered for what, and that just kind of helps remind people of what they volunteered for.
How many people did you invite in the list, or how many people are on his team?
Oh gosh,
Friends?
I don't know the exact number, but I would say there's probably about 20 now. But I would say on a given evening, because it's impossible to find a time that everybody can make it. So I would say there's usually about 12 to 15 that come. So we've had more people added to the group over time than people who have dropped out. So it keeps getting bigger.
Great.
It doesn't have to be that big. You know, you can keep it as big or as small as you want.
I love that, right? So that's, you know, Gene saying it's a good party, right? But I love, Nancy, that you're saying it doesn't have to be more works, because I know for many of us who are parents in general and then parents of a child with special needs, there's a lot of things that need to be done. And so I really love you emphasizing that, you know, one of the things someone could even volunteer for could be the one to facilitate if the parent didn't want to do that. Or someone could volunteer to be the one to take the notes or send out the notes. So there aren't a lot of tasks involved, it sounds like, but the ones that are, you could do as the family, or other people could help pick up some of those tasks as well. So I think that makes it feel a little less scary or overwhelming.
I agree with that. And I also think that people could volunteer to host it. You know, we just always hosted it. My husband and I like having people over. We both like to cook. So it's kind of almost an excuse for a party for us too, you know, a party that we get all these benefits from. But it doesn't have to be that way. Like I could imagine, you know, people every meeting, somebody volunteers to host the next meeting if people are interested in it. So I can see the running the meetings being passed around, and I can see hosting the meetings being passed around.
Nancy, I want to go back and ask one question too, because I'm just thinking, like when you said it was difficult to ask people. So can you kind of just tell, because I'm thinking for myself, it would be hard for me to probably ask some people. So how would you script that? Like do you go to grandma or I mean, somebody that cares about your child, obviously, and say, what do you say?
It's a great question, and I've had to do it. You know, I had that original ask the people at the person-centered plan, but then over the years, as new people have come into Brian's life, I always want to invite them. Okay, how am I going to do this? I talk about this group that we have whose mission is to support a quality of life for Brian. But I always emphasize when I'm asking people, but we also try to make it this a really fun social occasion. And, you know, I say we always offer food and we give everybody a chance to socialize before and after. It's this group of amazing people. So I know that people really like to come and get to talk to all these different interesting people. And, you know, now I can always add, because we've done this for a while, I can say everybody who's part of it says that they find this as a really energizing and exciting thing to be part of. But then I always have to say, because I'm me, like, but no pressure. Feel free to say no if you don't want to do this.
Right. Yeah, I bet a lot of people can relate to that, Nancy. So one of the questions was, and maybe for your family, but Gene, maybe do you know of other examples of where businesses were involved? So has anyone ever, you know, you could imagine there are opportunities for donations, there are opportunities for businesses or organizations to participate or help out. And the person who wrote that question in the Q&A, you're welcome to add more if you want to get more specific, but that's what they were asking.
Kim, this is Mimi. I interpreted it as whether businesses do this for families, would be the facilitators to help organize this. So I do know that some of the schools, as part of their transition plans, do offer some form of person-centered planning, but it may not always match up exactly with the values of person-centered planning. So you guys probably can add to that.
Gene,
I just want to
Gene, you
add
look like
because
you were going to talk.
no,
Yeah, I was trying to see if I was on mute or not. So am I?
Oh.
But I think that in schools, yeah, they often offer some flavor of person-centered planning, but it's usually not very thorough, I think, in my experience. And so this is more of an organic process. This is a party you could throw at your house or somewhere else. Some people might meet in a church building, and they might meet at the school when the kid's still school age, but it's building that team of people that's bigger than just the school team. Because as a parent, you probably know you walk into a school meeting and you're surrounded by 20 school people, you feel really overwhelming. It doesn't really feel about you so much. This is more you controlling it and deciding who you want to be there. It's great if you can find someone to take that facilitative role on. I know that it could sound overwhelming to say, how do I start this team for my kid when everything else in life is really difficult? But I would say start small with a little party of your close friends, family, and some people who know your child and care about your child, and build it up from there. It would really work well to start with the person-centered planning group and just say, do you want to continue this? Like I say, it's about twice a year we actually have the meetings. They are not, maybe half to 2/3 of the people show up for meetings. So our little article in Parenting Special Needs says more about how to set this up and what the process is also.
So Flip, I think I would love to hear you comment. I think Flip's family has had like a similar experience, even though they didn't take on the official GAP process. And Gene, I feel like that's kind of what you're saying. Like there are ways to get this started. And then Flip, if you wouldn't mind, after you share a bit, maybe let us know what's going on in Facebook too.
Yeah, actually this all ties in. So how appropriate, right? So some of the questions here were, is this process specifically for children with disabilities? And I would say that what I wanted to share is that I think many of us are doing some version of this process without really knowing that that's what we're doing. So obviously the GAP process is more formalized, but the idea of bringing teams together, even as Gene said, whether it's in IEPs or simply at home, like when we're trying to figure out what's for dinner, tonight. It's easy as a parent to say, this is what we're having when they're little, right? And that's kind of what we put in front of them. But as they get older, it becomes more of a family process. What does everybody want tonight? You know, let's sit together and write out our menu for the week, you know, or whatever. So I think there are some everyday situations that naturally occur, and it doesn't necessarily have to be because you have a child with a disability. And what I had shared was I made a really big decision about 5 years ago to go and achieve my master's. And that required a move 2 hours away from where we had been living. That meant we were changing schools, we were changing homes, we were moving away from our friends and our family. And so I didn't make that decision myself. It was conversations with our neighbors. It was conversations with my family, with my children, disabilities or not. It was a conversation with my partner. It was a conversation with my ex-husband. It was a broad amount of people. So I think that's important as well. And the other question, Jean, you already started answering, and that's how often do you meet? So I'll just ask, and I think, Jean, you said the process says twice, but can an incident come up, big or small, that, I don't know, Nancy, that you would say it's time for us to come together and collaborate?
Yes, definitely. As Jean said, in general, we shoot to meet about twice a year, so every 6 months. But just one of the wonderful things about this group, you know, this support group was that if something came up, and things did, you know, Brian's behavior got a lot better, but then there was just times when there was hiccups, and we could call a meeting and have people come and brainstorm and try to help us through it. Another awesome thing, once we had this group, like when Brian turned 18 through the Developmental Disabilities Administration, we were able to have him go stay in a place for respite for 2 weeks. And it was the first time that Brian had ever been away from us. And so the first time we ever got to take a vacation without Brian also. And so my husband and my younger son and I were going to go on vacation, but I was like, but what happens if something happens with Brian? And we just have this group. And so I just put out something to the Friends of Brian's group. Anybody willing to be kind of an on-call person if something happens while we're gone? And, you know, like 8 people from the group were like, sure, I'd be happy to. And so we just had this, if they all knew that if one of them wasn't available, there were 7 other people that would be. So there wasn't a whole lot of pressure on any one of them. And to us, it was just so reassuring to just know that there's this group that can help out if needed.
Nancy, you're leaving something out. As I remember, the very first time Brian went to that respite, you and John stayed home and sat by the phone expecting disaster to happen. You didn't go anywhere.
That's true. It was the second time, right?
That respite went well. The next summer, you actually went away because you
Okay. You're right. That's right. It was the second time. I forgot about that.
I love that. So we have a couple questions that I want to get to, and then I'd love to ask the group. I'd like to check in with Flip and see, you know, what about this process sounds similar or different from the process she's used that was maybe a little bit more informal. And we have Norma sharing in the chat box for us, you know, about her process doing this work. And what I would say is that, you know, no matter who's helping you to host a person-centered planning process, and Mimi and Jean, others are welcome to jump in, you should be, if it's person-centered planning, you're allowed to invite others. And so I think that's the comment Jean made about when a school facilitates, they probably say it somewhere along the line that you can have others, but I think many families think it has to be the partners, the one or two or whoever's in the house supporting the family, supporting the children. But it's your right to have other people involved in a person-centered planning process. And they can be neighbors, they can be friends. And I know our school process will be even better the more we get families feeling comfortable to bring in some of these other people who can do like Jean just did with Nancy, right? And say, wait, remember when? You know, it's nice to have that full group. And so we also have a question about where can people find more out about the GAP model? So Shantae, do you want to speak just briefly about the article? And then Jean, if maybe, where would we point people nationally in their own states? Where might they be able to go to find out more information?
Well, I'll just share too. We have the article goes into more detail. It's in our current issue, the July-August issue, page 22. Also on our site, we have several different articles about it's the dream, as well as person-centered planning, which can kind of help people step by step, just to kind of give them more of an idea. They can kind of do the search for that as well. And we'll get links and put them underneath this when we have them. But, and when we get back to commenting, I want to make a comment too about something that I realized during this. So.
Awesome. All right, we'll come right back to you on that. So folks, where would we point? You know, we also have the Home and Community Positive Behavior Support Network website that folks can go to and learn a lot more about the idea of having a team and using that positive behavior support framework to focus on quality of life. Jean, other places you might point folks?
The Beach Family Center has a website. It's what Ann and Rudd Turnbull developed back in Kansas during their time there. And so there are a lot of resources there. There's a family quality of life survey that a parent could just look at that and so to see where they might feel they need help with developing a quality of life for the whole family, not just for the individual. One of the other tasks I had in this process was nagging Nancy for the last couple of years, since no one had written about this since 1996 with the Turnbull's chapter in this book we referenced. I kept nagging Nancy that you have to write this up, you have to write this up. And so she finally tackled that, and I've been a bit of a help as an editor for that process. And so thank you to Shantae and Parenting Special Needs for publishing.
Thank you guys.
We're going to be also working on a longer article that would go to maybe a more formal journal so that there are more professionals out there that will know about this process. But right now, there's not a whole lot written just about this group action planning process, but I think of it again as sort of person-centered planning on steroids that never ends.
That's what I want to just thank you both as well. But I wanted to say too, because I think it's so important. It sounds like person-centered planning is more for the older children, but I strongly believe it's for the younger parents too. You don't have to have the dream as far as big as what they're going to do, you know, when they get out of high school, but you might have the dream of we want them to read and we want them to be able to play, you know, so how do we get them there? So that can still have a team that can help you achieve those goals. So I want to just mention that. And I wanted to mention too, I'm so thrilled that we talked about this because I've read the article and everything, but I never realized it was the social aspect. Like I've done the different team meetings and this person-centered planning, but I've never invited them over to my house. And I think that is such a wonderful idea because that makes it even more intimate and people really care. And like when you do go away, you have connections that you feel you can rely on. So I'm thrilled to know that information. So thank you.
Thank you, Shantae. So if you're here with us, you can see in the chat box, there's a couple articles that Mimi put in there for us that are related to this work, including how this could also work within a school system, a school setting to use a team process. And I know Flip was talking about using a type of a team process. And Shantae, hearing you say that about that, you know, focusing on the fun part, I know in this case, Brian's as active as he can be and wants to be, right? But it does make me think, like, we do something kind of similar where we have parties in our home and we sort of turn them over to Orion so that he can make the party the way he wants them. And he likes to do theater. So he brings up members of the party, the people at the party, and he includes them in these little plays that he directs. He likes to boss people around, so he likes to be a director. And it's amazing to see our neighbors, friends and friends of friends just start to get to know Orion's personality and really start to have fun playing with him the way that he likes to play. And you're right, our emergency contacts include neighbors because we don't live near our family, like Flip said. And so, you know, I think it takes some courage, right? As Nancy's saying, to feel okay to invite others in, to ask other people to join with you. But it's amazing how much people really do appreciate it. And Flip, I was wondering if you would share just briefly anything else about what kind of felt the same or different from the process you used. And then how are folks doing in Facebook? Any other comments or questions there? And then I think we'll take one more question for Gene and Nancy.
Sure. Oh, goodness. I think one of the big things, and Gene said it earlier, so for those who are just tuning in or who missed it, the big difference in this, in GAP action planning, is that the parent, the family, the child is who's leading the process. Although we see teaming in other settings, it's often very professional run. So like in IEP teams, it's generally a parent and a student, you know, or parents and a student against a whole table full of professionals. And there's a struggle there. But with this process, we get to choose those that are closest to us and in our lives and in our child's lives, that know our children best across all settings. It's not just school, it's community, it's family, it's, you know, about a plethora of different topics. It's where the child wants to live and the child's goals for working or, you know, having a social life. So I think that's where I find the stark differences. So thank you so much, Nancy and Gene, for sharing your wealth of knowledge, your story. I don't have any questions on Facebook right now, but people are loving all of the resources that have been provided. So thank you. We're getting some thank yous over here.
Thank you, Flip. Awesome. And I don't know if you're able to take, can someone take those links that are in the chat box and get them for those who are in Facebook as well? I don't know if they have access to them. That would be great.
Already done.
So, awesome. Perfect. I figured you were on that. So last question to Nancy and Gene before we say goodbye here. Any surprises that have come up in the process? And so the kind of a two-part question. One are, you know, some positive surprises, things that you didn't expect to get out of the process that you did. And I feel like we talked about that a little bit. And then any like possible challenges that people might want to be aware of going into this, right? Like things they might be able to prevent. So, you know, you started the process and you thought, oh shoot, we didn't even think of that thing, right? So anything in that surprise category before we say goodbye?
Well, I'll start there. As part of our goal to try to write up a more formal article too, I took on the task of interviewing most all of our team members and asking them about their experiences with Friends of Brian. And we think we start out here because we're givers. We want to help out some child, some family. What was surprising was that to a person, everyone said they feel they've gotten much more out of being part of this group than they've put in, that they've given. And I think there's just a big need people have to feel like they can contribute, to have that social connectedness. And people said, I feel good because, you know, I've been able to be part of this team and Brian's doing so well, and the family stress has really come down. People from, you know, grandma to neighbors, and some professionals too. They're just like, wow, this is kind of great. This is just fun to be part of, to see that I can, learn about this and I can be a helper, but I've strengthened all my connections with these other people, and I got to know people I wouldn't talk to normally in my life. Nancy, what do you think?
Yeah, so I just love that, Jean. That just made me so happy as the person who had to initially ask people to hear people say those things. It was awesome. The other thing that I would say came out of this that surprised me, even though I knew about the virtues of brainstorming, how great brainstorming is supposed to be. To see it happen in these meetings, I would often come into some of these meetings having no idea. Like, for instance, the meeting where we were going to brainstorm a job that Brian might enjoy. I literally could not imagine something that Brian could do for any extended period of time that he would enjoy. And it just happened meeting after meeting, to watch this brainstorming process of people from all different, come in at this from different angles, ping-ponging their ideas off of each other. The same thing when we were trying to envision a future living situation for Brian. I couldn't myself imagine a living situation that I would be happy with, but we just start this brainstorming, and somehow at the end of these meetings, we've just come up with these great ideas. And even though I knew that's supposed to happen, it just surprises me every time, and it amazes me and gratifies me every time.
Thank you. I love that. I love that. Shante, do you want to take it here? It's great to watch you, Shante. I'm pretty sure she's getting a GAP process going very soon. Do you see how happy she's been?
I am. Well, because I've had little bits and pieces of it, but never done the whole way. So I'm excited to think about that, because I think that you always need it. My daughter's 23, but I could still benefit from it. And I'm excited to put it in place. So yes, I'm thrilled. I can't thank you all enough for sharing with us, sharing the article that's got more detail. Again, it's on the current issue on page 22. It gives more step-by-step instructions. But Jean and Nancy, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing with us. I think this was, excellent. I hope people take advantage of it and start implementing it with their children, because I think it's huge benefit. So, and thanks to Kim and Flip and Mimi and everybody from Home and Community Positive Behavior Support that collaborated with us to bring this to you, and Virginia Commonwealth, I'm going to mess it up, Flip. Commonwealth University.
Center for Family Involvement.
Go ahead, say it, Flip, because I'm going to mess it up.
Center for Family Involvement at Virginia Commonwealth University.
Thank you, Flip, and I apologize, but I love you. So thank you. But thank you all, and I hope that you all got something out of this, and thank you for joining us. It was, I thoroughly enjoyed it, so thank you so much.
And keep a lookout. We plan to do these on a quarterly basis, so there'll be another one coming out in a few months, but tons of other resources and support from HCPBS.org. And from Parenting Special Needs Magazine. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Flip and Mimi, for doing the chats. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy and Jean. Thank you.